أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. الحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا وشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد على محمد صلى الله عليه وعلى آله الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين. اللهم وصل على ولي أمرك القائم المؤمل والعدل المنتظر وحفه بملائكتك المقربين وأيده بروح القدس يا رب العالمين. واللعنة الدائمة على أعدائهم وغاصبي حقوقهم ومنكري فضائلهم من يومنا هذا إلى قيام يوم الدين. أما بعد، فقد قال الله تعالى في كتابه المجيد: بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. ونفس وما سواها فألهمها فجورها وتقواها. صلوات اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. We were looking yesterday at how we can use this institution of marriage that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made very sacred institution, how we can use that as a vessel and means to get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yesterday we said that how difficult it is for us men, or rather we said how easier it is for the women to get to buy paradise through this institution of marriage. And today a step forward from there, bearing in mind that what we are talking about is our social relationship between ourselves as human beings, and how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us different roles, and in each and every role as we perform, it is supposed to take us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So bearing that in mind, what we have here is that in the institution of marriage, what we talked yesterday was just between a husband and his or her wife, his wife, the spouse. Today we take it a step forward, because after being a husband, slowly, once we enter into that institution of marriage, we become a father. What is known as parenthood. And parenthood itself is yet another stepping stone to take us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, provided, and this is the biggest condition of everything we've been talking about, provided we realize that whatever we do it for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If we're doing it for each other, if we're doing it to please the opposite spouse, if we are doing it to please the family, to please the society we live in, nothing is going to happen. It has to be exclusively for the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for that to become a stepping stone, or rather a vessel to take us closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, when we enter parenthood, again, there are responsibilities, there are duties. And it is important to know what are the rights of the children, what rights the children have over their parents. What are the responsibilities of parents as parents? How far are they responsible for the behavior of their children? What are they supposed to do? And there is a difference between fatherhood and motherhood. And like I was saying yesterday, just as in the case of a husband and wife, when we were looking at a home, we found that the wife has so easy opportunities, so many opportunities and Allah has made it easy for them to aspire for paradise, to buy paradise because of what they can do in a home. Similarly, when it comes to parenthood, fatherhood and motherhood are so different that a mother has, from the time she conceives, from the time a child is in the womb, up to the time she delivers and gives birth, up to that time she has so many opportunities where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive all her sins. All her sins. This doesn't happen to a father. Huh? There is no opportunity in parenthood where for a father, the hadith says that yes, at this time, anything she asks for or he asks for, the father would get it from Allah. No, nothing. But for a mother, yes. حملته كرها ووضعته كرها. That she carried him. She bore him. The child. And it is that period of 9 months during which a mother is carrying a child, that whilst on one side and duties towards her, on the other side, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very merciful in forgiving us. You see, the hadith says, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi, salli ala says, السعيد سعيد في بطن أمه والشقي شقي في بطن أمه. That means a person who lives a happy life, who is a successful person, starts whilst he is in the womb of his mother. And a person who is lost and astray in this world, the beginning is whilst he is at the womb of his mother. السعيد سعيد في بطن أمه والشقي شقي في بطن أمه. When the Imam was asked to explain, obviously we need an explanation. We cannot just pass such a strong statement that a person is successful from the time he is in his mother's womb, or a person is unsuccessful or lost from the time he is in his mother's womb. The explanation from the Imam was quite simple, that the nurturing and the training, the directing of our children that we as parents are supposed to do, starts from the time when the child is in the mother's womb. It starts from that time. From that time, a mother has to be so careful what she eats, what she listens to, what she thinks. Everything that is her is transformed into thoughts and vibes and forces that influences the child. Our Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam was walking with his companions. Now when the Holy Prophet passes by and the companions together, there is an aura, there is, people can see that these are people who are coming. So the children who play actually move away, make way for the Prophet and the companions to pass. Now he was passing the streets of Medina when suddenly all the children ran away but one child. That child did not run away. Not only did the child not run away, the child blocked the path of the Prophet. So as the Prophet was walking, the Prophet came to a stop. It's a child, a young child, playing with something. So the companions turned to the child and said, make way for the Prophet to move. So he said, he can move away. The child is saying that he can move away from me. Why should I move? The companions were very upset by this behavior. They had not taught their children to treat the Prophet in this manner. So they wanted to hit the boy. They wanted to grab hold of the boy and say, you know what you're doing? This is the Holy Prophet. You can't speak like this in front of the Holy Prophet. So the Prophet told them, and these are the words in the hadith, the Prophet told them, leave him alone, for he is an illegitimate child. It's not his fault. Waladul haram. It is not his fault, he is waladul haram. He doesn't understand the respect of a prophet in his heart. Leave him alone. So the companion said, Ya Rasulullah, but this child is the product of a marriage you recited. You recited the nikah. How can you call this child a haramzada, an illegitimate child? So he says, is that so? Let's go to the father. They go to the father's house, the companions together now. The companions are shocked to the core that the Prophet has called a child who was born of a marriage that he recited as an illegitimate child. So the companions want to get to the bottom of this. How did this happen? Who is this? What is this? They come in, the companion, the father is so happy that the Prophet has come to his house. The companions all together get inside his house, and then the companions tell him, you know what the Prophet has said? The Prophet has said your son is an illegitimate child. And the companion, this person, the father got so angry that he actually took out his sword and he said, Ya Rasulullah, awa ta'muru naqtula. Do you allow me? You tell me I will kill the child. How dare he say this against you? And you are telling me it is a haramzada, but Ya Rasulullah, you recited my nikah. The Holy Prophet looked down and said, whilst the child was in his mother's womb, did she eat something that is haram? Something that is not allowed. So the man said, why don't you ask my wife? And she called his wife and asked her, did you? And she said, yes. She said, I was walking in the park when I picked up something, an apple or a fruit that did not belong to me, and I ate it. The Prophet said, the effect of what you ate at that time has come out today on your son. Mind you, the issue was not that the Prophet's path was blocked and the Prophet could not move away. The issue was the audacity that such a young child has to question the leadership of the Prophet. And for anybody to have that feeling that who is a Prophet? He is an ordinary human being. He could do this differently. I am no different. For anybody to question the authority of the Prophet at that level, there is something wrong with us. The Holy Prophet is saying that what a mother ate when the mother was just expecting the child had a direct effect on the child's spirituality. No physical defects. Huh? The child's spirituality. So a mother's responsibility. When Imam Ali alayhi salam said, "As-sa'idu sa'idun fi batni ummihi, wa-shaqiyyu shaqiyyun fi batni ummihi," he meant that process of clean and pure spirituality begins with the womb of the mother. So you can see how much of a responsibility it is on the mother. It starts with the period of pregnancy. When a mother is expecting a child for those 9 months, we are told in a hadith that she should try and remain and stay in the state of wudu as much as possible. She should refrain from looking at bad things. She should read and recite as much from the Quran as possible. Why? Because whatever she does, her actions, whatever she says, her words, whatever she thinks, her thoughts, have a direct bearing on the life that is growing within. A direct bearing. And whilst physically you may not notice it, spiritually it has a direct bearing. That is why then when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or the Holy Prophet in his ahadith say that a woman who goes through all that, this is a difficult phase. Because now that expectant mother is looking after two lives, her own as well as the child that is inside, in all aspects, physical health as well as spiritual. So she has to look out for two lives. Then when the time of childbirth comes in, no man can even claim to comprehend that we know what she is going through. We don't know. We don't know because we will never feel it, we will never experience it. Yet what we know is that the hadith says, as a mother goes through childbirth, through labor, or after she delivers, from the moment she delivers, the hadith is very clear, that the mother and child are clean of sins, ma'asum, as if they're both born on the same time. All her sins are forgiven. You tell me, as a father, as man, man to man now, you tell me what opportunity, when do we get that opportunity to say, okay, all our sins are forgiven, clean? As a mother, as a woman, when she becomes a mother, when she delivers a child, that is the time when all her sins are forgiven. As an aside, whenever we talk of all sins forgiven, we have this question coming up, and I think it is only apt that I address it now, because when we talk of all sins forgiven, we have during childbirth to a woman, we have when a person is martyred, when a person dies, martyr, and in martyrdom, all sins are forgiven. So say, but what about hukukun nas? When it is between people, how can Allah forgive that? You remember last time we were doing Ashras in Abiyah that where we have hukukun nas, where men have accounts to settle with other human beings. And in that, if I have stolen from you, or I have wronged you, or I have accused you, or abused you, or talked about you, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on that day will open the gates for human beings to settle, each other to settle. There is no settlement or no forgiveness from Allah. You have wronged somebody, you settle with him. So, when it comes to forgiving all the sins, what about hukukun nas? It's a question that we're asked all the time. We say this, a person who dies a martyr, and for the same token, a woman who dies in childbirth goes to Jannah straight away. Right? Now, because all her sins are forgiven. Now, if the sins are forgiven, she goes to paradise straight away. Just like a martyr, who dies in the way of Allah, he goes straight to paradise. The question is very simple, that what about hukukun nas? Would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not have a phase, a station somewhere and say, alright, you are going straight to paradise, but before that you settle your accounts with people first, before I allow you in? Is that what would happen? No. And this is where we have to understand the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It is true that a person who dies a martyr or a mother who dies in childbirth will go to paradise straight, but it is also true that he or she might have some lingering accounts to settle with human beings, right? So what would happen with them is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in his infinite mercy says, because as a martyr I have promised you paradise, you will go to paradise with all the baggage you have brought together with you. So if you have score to settle with 100 people, all the 100 can also go to paradise. You think Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to make him small or big by allowing people to enter into paradise? This is Allah's mercy. that when Allah promises paradise, if for any reason whatsoever there is an account to settle, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if I hold an account with with a matter and say, no, you cannot go because you accused me or you talked about me, now you cannot go until you settle this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says to us, well, let's go. Is there any problem? This is how Allah has promised. Regardless, there are no barriers. Anybody who is promised paradise is promised paradise. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will grant it. So, coming back to the responsibilities of parents, the responsibilities of parents start when the child is still in the mother's womb. And it is that time when a mother's food, diet, when a mother's thought process, when a mother's words and actions, everything has a direct bearing and influence on the child, both physical and spiritual. After childbirth, yes, it is highly recommended that a mother breastfeeds her child for at least 2 years. That's the period that has been mentioned in the Quran, 24 months. Well, again, what has been encouraged is that a mother feeds her child, and in that process, the diet that she takes goes into the child, and therefore what she thinks, what she eats, just as in the course of her pregnancy, similarly when she is feeding a child, the same effect, the same influence goes on to the child. Now, whilst all this is happening, you will notice that for the first 2 years, so it is during pregnancy, childbirth, and for the first 2 years, when a woman is breastfeeding her child, at least 3 years, 2 years or 3 years, the strongest bond is the maternal bond between the mother and the child. Father knows you. The father is helping wherever he can. The father is providing wherever he can. And at the end, the father is ultimately responsible for what happens to the child. Can you see the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has created us for our own roles? Men, whilst physically don't have to carry a child, don't have to feed a child, during that period of 3 years, men have to make sure that the woman is fed correctly, physically and spiritually. The woman is provided for correctly, physically and spiritually. That the environment that they live in is environment conducive to nurturing children. Then the guidance goes on. The guidance says, as parents, after children are born, how do you care for them? How do you nurture them? How do you raise them? And it is a good time to compare what Islam says and what we do as parents. It's a very good time. Mind you, Islam has very clear set guidelines on up to what level we have our responsibility and up to what level we are responsible for our children's behavior. The first 7 years, the hadith says, "Atrukhum sab'ah." Leave them. Leave them alone. First 7 years. The mind of a child is developing. Any medical doctor will also tell you. The mind of a child is developing, and therefore allow the child's mind to develop freely without you restricting the child's mind. For 7 years, help the child build up his or her mind. وَأَدِّبُهُمْ سَبْعًا. And the next 7 years you discipline the child. وَصَاحِبْهُمْ سَبْعًا. And from 14 to 21, the third 7 years, be a companion to a child. 0 to 7, 8 to 14, and 15 to 21. These three phases are clearly outlined and defined in Islam, how we as parents are supposed to treat our children. First 7 years, let them be whatever they want, however they want to do it. Don't correct them, don't force them, let them be. You know, long ago, and I'm sure my elders will correct me if I am wrong, long ago it used to be a taboo for a child to write with his left hand. And when would they correct it? They would correct it when they're children. When they see as a young child, 3 and 4 years old, that the young boy is holding his pencil with the left hand, they would tie the left hand and force the child to write with his right hand. This would impair the mind development. Today medicine has proved it. The hadith says, let the child do whatever the child likes. For the first 7 years, don't touch the child. Mind you, it is difficult, huh? I speak as a father as well. I have a young child as well. I have young children rather. It's difficult to leave a child for the first 7 years. 3 years, man. 7 years. Well, when they say you leave the child, of course, it doesn't mean you leave the child, masjid aaye to let him run around, namaz padhto hai to let him run around. No. What it means, you leave a child, it means don't influence the child's mind. Don't influence the child. You know, we have a habit of being very quickly and say, don't do this, don't do this, do this, don't do it. Not like this. We instill in them lack of confidence on themselves at that age. A young child who is used to listening to don't do this and don't do it like this and not like this will grow up never to have confidence on himself. You let a child develop. When the hadith says leave a child for 7 years, that means allow the child's mind to develop without you having to impose your opinions, your ideas on a 7-year-old child or an under 7-year-old child. Then addibhum sab'a means now from 8 to 14 you teach the child and discipline the child. That means if a child, the hadith is very clear. When I talk of hadith, there is a scholar called Agha Muhammad Taqi Falsafi. Agha Muhammad Taqi Falsafi is a contemporary. He died, I think, 3 or 4 years ago. He was, in Iran, and he has written 2 volumes of books on how to rear your children. Just children. Atif. Right? Kudakan in Farsi. It's been translated in Arabic. Unfortunately, it's not there in English. And then he went on to write 2 books of Jawanan, that means the youth stage. And he went on to write 2 books of Buzurgan, that means the seniors. The 2 books contain ahadith and guidance on how we are supposed to treat the children. These things, what I'm presenting here is just a nutshell, a summary. But this is the most important thing. The second phase is disciplining a child. Now, how do you discipline a child? You discipline a child by raising your hand, by raising your voice. You discipline a child by the hadith of the Holy Prophet says that if it means you don't allow, it's like you're training your child to recite namaz before dinner, right? Don't allow them to have dinner with you until they have recited prayers. Train your children to recite prayers before they come for dinner. Use dinner as an excuse to teach and discipline your children to recite prayers. Now, disciplining your children in all ways possible is so important. It is that phase that will make it or break it. From 8 to 14. And you train the child in whatever you want the child to do and become, in whatever you want the child to think like. You let go of the child more than 7 years. You don't force the child your opinion and your ideas and your the way you would like the child to become up to the age of 13 or 14. It is too late. It has to be in this phase between 8 and 14 when you can control the child's mind in what direction it is heading. After that, وَصَاحِبْهُمْ sab'an. That means now you are a companion to the child. From the age of 15 up to the age of 21, every child is going through physiological changes. Now the child needs help and guidance. The child needs somebody to be able to talk to. And if as a parent you are not there for the child, if as a parent you have built a wall, such a hard wall, that the child finds you inaccessible, the child finds he cannot talk to you because of your temper, because of your rigidness, then what will the child do? We have ample of evidence around us. The child will go out looking for answers. The questions will always come. If a parent is not there for the child will go out looking for answers, and when it goes out looking for answers, you know what answers the child is going to find, where it is going to find. We all know this. This is how we try and make a whole unit, a family. We make it a whole unit in such a way that one supplements the other, in such a way that one is helping the other. Not only as a father, when I look at the different phases of my son, I want to help my son, and then it helps me remind myself of what is right, what is wrong. That is why Allah has created this cycle. That is why Allah wants us to use this small unit of a family as a stepping stone towards getting closer to Him. It acts as a reminder. And if I am there to look after my son, I don't have to look after children of anybody else, my son only. And you look after your son, and he looks after his son. As a society, we will be looking after our children, who will then look after their children, who will then look after their children. If we pass over from generation to one generation to another, just this particular practice, that remember, our important survival is through this, from father to son, from father to son. You think we would have problems in society? We wouldn't have a problem. Problems start when some parents are lax, some parents are more rigid, some parents, and so you have different kinds of problems. Obviously, we are living in a society, you're bound to have problems. But look at the end result. That after these three phases, what are the kind of children one can produce? You look at, for example, Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, where Prophet Ibrahim's son Ismail, who was born at such a late age, then Prophet Ibrahim sees in his dream that he is slaughtering his son, and he asks his son, Ya bunayya inni ara fi manami anni adbahuka, that I see in my dream that I am slaughtering you. قال يا أبتي افعل ما تؤمر. Do what you have been asked. a son who is pushing his father to kill him. Why? Because here is a son who understands that this is Allah's command to a prophet of Allah, and there is no escaping it, there is no avoiding it, there is enough faith on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to rely on Allah. If He wants this, if this is where His pleasure lies, then so be it. Oh Father, do what you have been asked. Satajiduni insha'Allah min as-sabirin. You will find me amongst the patient ones, amongst the tolerant ones. This is a product of true upbringing by Prophet Ibrahim. On the same token, you find Prophet Nuh alayhi salam, who had a son, who tried his best. But at the end, when the time of the flood came, his own son refused to board the ark. The Quran is talking about it. His own son refused to board the ark. Here is where it gets more interesting, because this is a challenge to us, where we have to put our culture and our religion. Prophet Nuh, when he saw his son not boarding the ark, he turns to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and says, Ya Allah, that is my son, and you promised me that my family will not perish. Oh Allah, and you never break your promises. What about my son? Simple question that Prophet Nuh had. It's true. When Prophet Nuh asked that who will be saved, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promised Prophet Nuh that you and your family and those who believe will be saved. So Prophet Nuh, when he saw his son not jumping into the ark, and not only that, defying Prophet Nuh, saying that no, I will go up to the highest mountains and water will not come to me and I will not die. He raises his hands and says, Ya Allah, this is my son, and you promised me that nothing will happen to my family. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala immediately says, Ya Nuh, innahu laysa min ahlik. He is not from your family. Blood son, huh? Blood son. He is not from your family. إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ إِنَّهُ عَمَلٌ غَيْرُ صَالِحٍ. Now, what happens here? What happens here is that at that age, when now the child has become an adult, now you cannot control the way the child thinks, the way the child does. Now, although the child is your child, the child is free to decide on a path of life. Now, at that moment, if the child decides to reject your way of life, to reject all you have taught the child, what happens then? What happens then? Well, Islam is quite clear in guidance that we cannot, as parents also, forget human beings, as parents, so the love, the maternal bond, the paternal bond is so strong. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنَّهُ لَيْسَ مِنْ أَهْلِكَ. If he dares to disobey Allah, then he is not part of your family. Do you understand the message here? We are not talking of blood relations. We are not talking of we are talking of the spiritual bond that in the eyes of Allah is much stronger than any other bond we may have. Where Allah is saying, you want to take sides, you take sides between me and your child. You decide. It's a tough decision to make. I know of a family now, when a young girl comes 14, 15 years old, to her parents and says, look, I respect your wishes. We're talking of our own Khoja family. I respect your practices. I respect everything you're doing. But from now on, I am not coming to the mosque because I don't believe in your God. I don't believe in what you're telling me. I don't believe. I reject outright what you're telling me. You have taught me everything. I am an adult now. I will carry on with my life. You want me to live here? I will live here. You don't want me to live here? I will go away. A dilemma. The maternal instinct of the mother is saying that no, keep the child at home so that at one time the child may learn, may come back. That is the maternal instinct saying. What about the spiritual? What about Allah's decision? Does Allah want us as parents to keep children like this? What is holding us back? That is why I say that we have to understand even the unit of a family as a spiritual unit. Everything revolves around Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Nothing else. And we will be judged on the day of judgment by how we have decided whether we have made what pleases Allah as our pleasure or we have made what pleases us as our yardstick. If we have decided that what is convenient for us, what pleases us, what we wanted as our yardstick and criteria, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will say, fine, take reward from yourself. The life in this world revolves around the Creator. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us. He gave us the powers, He gave us the bounties, He gave us everything, and He expects us to rule according to His decision, what pleases Him. So, my friend cannot be somebody who disobeys Allah. Can he be? He can't. I cannot befriend somebody who openly dares disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I cannot take a spouse of somebody who openly disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We all agree there. What about children? What about children? Can I carry on with children who are, who disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as my own, and I would give my life for them? Would it work? It wouldn't work. So, up to the time, the age of 21, وَصَاحِبْهُمْ سَبْعًا, provided you have done all your duties, there is nothing to worry about. There is nothing you have lost in this world because you are not responsible for what your child becomes. Remember that. Unless and until, of course, you have done things wrongly in the first 21 years. But if for the first 21 years we have provided for our children, we have provided the correct atmosphere, we have provided the correct environment, if we have done all that, then despite that, if a child becomes disobedient to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you raise your hands and say, oh Allah, I did my best. Now you handle the child. And mind you, I always emphasize whenever I'm talking about this, as parents, doing our best does not mean driving the child every Sunday to madrasa and say, madrasa diyan rakho. It doesn't work. Huh? It doesn't work. What madrasa does is a favor for us. What the teachers in madrasa do is actually taking over the parents' role in trying to teach the children something. But it doesn't end there, because neither does the madrasa have sufficient time over children, nor do they have sufficient control over the children, nor do they have sufficient authority over the children. It is us as parents who have to talk to the children, who have to teach the children more than what the madrasa is doing. So just because just because I used to take the children to madrasa does not expect miracles come out from madrasa. It is at home. On contrary, is nowadays we as parents, we try to give an atmosphere that is exactly contradicting what the madrasa is trying to do. The madrasa teaches the children that music is haram. The moment the child sits in the car, the father is already listening to the music. It happens. It has happened. I mean, I am talking of my experience in Stanmore. I don't know about Milton Keynes, so don't all take this personally, please. But it happens, and I am sure it happens everywhere. You have heard of this. We as parents are responsible for children after the age of 21. Now, after the age of 21, if a child is not proper Muslim, is not a good Muslim, there are two ways to look at it. Either as parents we have failed, or we have done our best, the child doesn't. If as parents we have failed, then we need to revisit our parenting skills and our parenting duties. And although we will not get another chance with the same child, we will at least get another chance with other children. But if we have done enough, if we have done everything, then the child still, despite our attempts, happens to go out of line, happens to disobey Allah, happens to be a very, rowdy person, then keep away from the child. Don't mean you take the child away from home and say, you're not my son, get out of my house. It doesn't work like that, please. That's not my aim is to understand the spiritual bond that exists. But don't allow the physical bond that is of a father and a son or a mother and a son to affect the spiritual bond between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If I sit here and tell you that you cannot allow money to affect the bond between you and God, you say, yes, that is understandable. Right? Don't allow wealth or property or friends to influence or affect the bond you have between Allah and yourself. You will say, fine, that is understandable. Now, to that list I am adding that don't allow a lost child, your own blood child, but a lost cause to affect the relationship you have with your God. Don't allow that. And mind you, you want to listen, you look at history, there are so many examples of history where children have always gone astray. Surah Yusuf, look at Surah Yusuf, where for the sake of two children, Yusuf and Binyamin, the rest of his 11 brothers or 9 brothers, 10 brothers, plotted and conspired. And what did Prophet Yaqub tell them? I don't want to know you. I have heard these stories before. I know from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that something is waiting for me. It happens. It is until the boys sought forgiveness that Prophet Yaqub and Yusuf forgave them. But until that time, Prophet Yaqub did not want to know them. Why? Because they lied, they conspired. So, what we have to do is we have to train our children to the best of our abilities. And that is our moral, legal responsibility. And use that phase in our life. Call it fatherhood, call it motherhood, call it parenthood. That phase in our life to boost our own spirituality. And if it doesn't work with the child, let the child be. Don't allow the child to bog you down. Let the child be, and you continue in your ascension towards Allah. The choice is ours. Whether we want to continue getting closer to Allah or no, hamaro chokro odare wahalo chhe. So I would rather, look after my son. The choice is ours. But these are the stark realities of choices we have. When you look at Karbala, you find young children, but so optimistic about life. You find young children so clear in their vision. These young children were what? 11, 12, 13 years old, yet they had learnt from their parents what is life all about. You know, yesterday we were talking about the two young children of Zainab alayha salam, Aun and Muhammad. Such young children, but they knew exactly what they had to do, how they had to do it, what they had to acquire. And they knew that they were going to die, but death was not death, death was martyrdom. Young children. Imam Hassan al-Islam had 3 sons at least in Karbala. One was Hassan al-Muthanna. Hassan al-Muthanna was, according to some historians, Hassan al-Muthanna was injured, presumed dead, until everybody had gone, when the battle had ended. That is when he recovered. And so he went on to lead normal life and carry on with the progeny of Imam Hassan al-Islam, Hassan al-Muthanna. The second son was Qasim ibn al-Hakim. Qasim was 13 years old. When Qasim came to Imam Hussein alayhi salam and says, "Uncle, allow me to go to the battlefield now," Imam Hussein alayhi salam looks at him and says, "Such a young child, my nephew that reminds me of his father." Qasim, it is said, resembled his father Imam Hassan the most. So Imam Hussein al-Islam is telling him, "Qasim, you know, every time I look at you, you remind me of my brother. Now you have come to me to take permission to go and die. Tell me, how can I allow you to go and die?" Qasim looks at him and says, "Uncle, everybody has gone in the battlefield. You must allow me to go to the battlefield as well." બસ આશુરના દિવસે જ્યારે કાસિમ ઇમામ પાસે આવે છે અને કહે છે, "ચાચા, મને હવે રજા આપો, તમે હું मैदाનમાં જાઉં." ત્યારે ઇમામ હુસૈન પહેલા તો ખૂબ રડે છે, જોઈને ભાઈની નિશાની જ્યારે મોત વાસ્તે માંગવા આવે છે ત્યારે ઇમામ ખૂબ રડે છે. પછી કહે છે, "કાસિમ, તને એક સવાલ કરું, મને જવાબ તો દે. મને કે તારી નજરમાં મોત શું છે?" ત્યારે કાસિમ કહે છે, "અલ મૌતુ અહલા મિન અલ અસલ." મધ કરતા વધારે મીઠી લાગે છે. ઇમામ જ્યારે આ જવાબ સાંભળે છે ત્યારે એને સંતોષ થાય છે કે નહીં, ખરેખર કાસિમ ભલે નાનો છે પણ સમજે છે કે શું છે. ઇમામ હુસૈન અલૈહિસ્સલામ એમને રજા આપે છે. બસ જ્યારે ભાઈની નિશાનીને ખુદાફિઝ કરે છે, રિવાયતમાં છે ઇમામ હુસૈન અલૈહિસ્સલામ પોતાના હાથેથી હઝરત કાસિમને સવાર કરે છે, ઘોડામાં તલવાર આપે છે અને પછી કહે છે, "કાસિમ જા આવે ખુદાના ભરોસે." જનાબે કાસિમ મેદાનમાં જાય છે, લડાઈ કરે છે, બહાદુરીથી લડાઈ કરે છે. પણ જ્યારે દુશ્મનો એને ઘેરી નાખે છે, કોઈ વાર કરે છે તલવારનો, કોઈ બરછીનો, કોઈ તીરનો, છેવટે કાસિમ ઘોડા ઉપર પોતાને સંભાળી નથી શકતો. જનાબે કાસિમ ઘોડામાંથી પડે છે ત્યારે અવાજ આપે છે, "અદરિકની યા અમ્મા, મારા ચાચા, મને બચાવો તમે." ઇમામ હુસૈન અલૈહિસ્સલામ ખૈમામાંથી દોરે છે. બસ રિવાયતમાં છે દુશ્મનો જે કાસિમની આજુબાજુમાં ઊભા હતા, જ્યારે જોઈ છે કે ઇમામ હુસૈન ત્યાંથી આવે છે ત્યારે ભાગા ભાગી ચાલુ કરે છે. ઘોડા ઉપર હોય છે, ભૂલી જાય છે કે 13 વર્ષનો બચ્ચો જમીન ઉપર સૂતો છે. ગોરાઓ દોરાવે છે ઈ બચ્ચાના છાતી ઉપર. જ્યારે ગોરાઓ દોરે છે, જનાબે કાસિમ ઘરી ઘરી રાર પારે છે, યા અમ્મા, યા અમ્મા, યા અમ્મા. એની છાતી ઉપર ગોરા વટાય છે. ઇમામ હુસેન જ્યારે આવે છે ત્યારે શું જોઈ છે? 13 વર્ષનો છોકરો એના ઉપર ગોરા વટાઈને પામાલ કરી નાખે છે લાશને. ઇમામ હુસેન અલૈહિસ્સલામ ઇમામ હસનની આ યાદગીરીને પોતાના હાથે ઉપાડી ગોરા ઉપર બેસે છે, ખૈમા તરફ આવે છે. રિવાયતમાં છે કે ગોરાએ જનાબે કાસિમની લાશને એટલી પામાલ કરી હોય છે કે ઇમામ હુસેન અલૈહિસ્સલામ કાસિમની છાતી પોતાની છાતી ઉપર રાખ્યા હોય છે, પરંતુ કાસિમના પગ જમીન ઉપર ઘસરતા હોય છે. એમ કરતા કરતા ઇમામ આસ્તે આસ્તે ખૈમા તરફ આવે છે. ફિઝા, આવ મને મદદ કર. આ જનાબે હસનની નિશાનીને પાછું લાવે છે. બહેનો બધા ભેગા થાય છે, ખૂબ માતમ કરે છે. પણ આ ઇમામ હસનની છેલ્લી નિશાની જે હોય છે, 10 વર્ષનો બાળક અબ્દુલ્લા કરીને ઈશ્વરના દિવસે જ્યારે બીબી ઝૈનબ આલેહા સલામ તિલ્લામાંથી જોઈ છે કે શિમર મલાઉન ઇમામ હુસેનના છાતી ઉપર બેઠો છે, ત્યારે ઝૈનબના હાથમાં એક 10 વર્ષનો બચ્ચું ઇમામ હસનનો દીકરો હતો. એ દીકરા જ્યારે જોઈ છે, એ બચ્ચું જોઈ છે, મારા ચાચાની છાતી ઉપર મલૂન બેઠો છે, તો દોરે છે મેદાન તરફ. યા અમ્મા કરીને દોરે છે. ચાચા જાન કરીને દોરે છે. ઇમામની બાજુમાં પહોંચે છે એ પહેલા એક મલઉન તલવાર કાઢે છે. 10 વર્ષનો બચ્ચો હાથ ઊંચા કરે છે, ચાચા મને બચાવો. મલઉન તલવાર દોરાવે છે. ઇમામ હસનની નિશાનીને મેદાનમાં